Hey there, everybody. How y'all making out? Today's guest is Drummers Collective instructor and all-around killer drummer Tobias Ralph. We get into varying challenges of playing with such badasses as Adrian Ballou and Dave Kuzinski and Jimmy Hazel of 24/7 Spies. Plus growing up in the West Village and seeing Billy Cobham live for the first time in the 80s and recounting a drunken Zildjian Day event with Steve Gadd and Vinnie Colaiuta and challenges in composing drum solos and a whole lot more drum geekery and awesomeness. Crash Bang Boom Podcast is available on the following platforms: SoundCloud, iTunes, Podcast, Stitcher, YouTube, and more, as well as Facebook and Instagram. Please subscribe and leave a positive rating if you can. It would be greatly appreciated. Shout out to my sponsor, New Orleans Record Press. If you're looking at putting out vinyl for your project, check out NewOrleansRecordPress.com. They're the first state-of-the-art record pressing facility in New Orleans. They'll press 12 and 7-inch records in both standard weight, 150 gram, and heavyweight, 180 gram variants. They'll even offer professional graphic design and project consulting services if you need them. Don't see what you want on their site? Need more options? Contact them for special projects. They also do projects of all sizes, from runs as low as 100 units up to commercial pressings into the thousands. So check it out and tell them Crash Bang Boom sent you, all right? And that's NewOrleansRecordPress.com. So anyways, here we go, y'all. Tobias Ralph. Dude's a badass. Check out this conversation. Here we go. Crash Bang Boom.
Crowds go mad with joy. Give the drum
Blue collar, black future. Blue collar, black future, baby. Blue collar, black future. Blue collar, black future.
Tobias Ralph, what's happening, man? How you making out?
Great, hanging in there, making it through the beautiful fall, and
Yeah, well, the good news is it's about to be winter. It's going to be cold as hell, and then there's going to be shitty snow and garbage everywhere. It's going to be fantastic, man. Don't you just love New York? You're from here. You've been dealing with this your whole life. I don't know how you have dealt with this your entire life. It's crazy.
Yeah, it takes sometimes a hardy soul to kind of get through the winters, and we sort of huddle inside, and I've become an avid fan of football all of a sudden. So
amazing. Do you root for New York teams?
I do, even though they lose all the time. I always root for them, but
it's a tough season for New York football fans.
Very tough.
I mean, you got 3 teams to root for, and still no one to really get super excited. Well, the good news is that my team, the New Orleans Saints, is kicking ass this season. So if you want to watch a game where there's some ass kicking and some high scoring and some good shit to watch, you can always watch my team try to win.
I do. I always root for the Saints. Oh, absolutely.
Nice, man. It's funny, dude. I was thinking about it today, where I originally heard about you, and I think honestly it might have been some time ago. I've been in New York now for 13 years, so I would say maybe 11 to 12 years ago, there was a feature on the drummerworld.com website. And at the time, that was just kind of the one place that you could go to find out about drummers.
That's true.
Initially, there weren't many websites dedicated to it. That was one of the first ones. Yeah. So in one of them, it was like, new featured drummer, Tobias Ralph. And I was like, who is this guy? And I was checking it out and not realizing that I had records with you playing with Dave Kuzinski and some other records that I had just forgotten about you even being on. So I was already familiar with your playing. But I remember seeing that and thinking, man, this guy's got some fast hands. And that was one of the things that stuck out in my mind. So yeah, that's how I was getting the drummer info back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? We can rewind. Obviously, you're from New York. Tell me a little bit about growing up in New York, and where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up, actually, I was born and raised on Christopher Street in Greenwich Village.
That's wild, dude. I call people like you the Sasquatch. It's rarely seen, to find a true New York native, Manhattan native, no less.
I know. Well, I was sort of the mutt that was born in New York. My parents were from California. It was a great upbringing because it sort of exposed me to understanding that there are, to embrace all walks of life, every type of person, everything. And in addition, there was all these great jazz clubs around there at that point.
Right.
And so my dad was very instrumental in sort of taking me to these clubs to see drummers. You know, I remember getting to see Billy Cobham
Wow.
play at the bottom line. I guess I want to say maybe 82, you know, and sort of being right in the front in between his two bass drums. And he had this gray pewter Tama drum set. And as he was playing and doing one of his big fills, and he had clear dots on his toms, and the stick went over the drums, like the toms, and landed right on the table in front of me.
Come on.
And I was the littlest, you know, I was the youngest kid there. I don't know, maybe 10 years old, and all the guys were like, grab it. And, you know, we grabbed it, and it was, you know, I still have the stick to this day, and it was like the stick that was splintered off, and it's like the sticks, you know, smelled like Billy's cologne, which was hilarious.
That's wild. And Tobias knows that because he slept with it for 2 months straight next to his pillow, cuddling that stick.
Cuddling that stick. I did. I just was like, oh my God. Like, how does he play so fast with a stick this big? Because at the time, he was using a Vic Firth rock stick, which was at
Closer
that
to like
time
a
pretty
2B
much
or something?
Yeah, it was actually bigger than a 2B. And he
Okay.
was flying around the set.
Wow.
So I was amazed. So,
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, that stick's not going anywhere.
I hear you. And it's funny, man, in watching him, I've only seen him once, and that was in like the 90s, I believe. But he's a shorter guy from what I can tell, but he sits very high.
Yeah, he sits high, and he's very broad.
Yeah.
And I mean, at that time, I mean, his arms were
Yeah.
huge. And I remember him, you know, his drum set was so big that sort of the band had to be on either side of him.
Wow.
And, you know, and it was sort of the first time that I had ever seen anybody use an inverted China, you know, super high, way up there. And it was just, mind blowing.
So needless to say, probably a pinnacle and influential moment for you, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, definitely.
At that point, were you already playing drums or pursuing the drums?
I was already playing. You know, I was fortunate. My dad was a classical pianist.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And a music teacher, and my mom had been a modern dancer, ballet dancer.
Oh.
You know, and then was teaching. So they were very encouraging of the arts. You know, I mean, I think, you know, sometimes in their mind they're like, oh, don't you want to just be a lawyer? You know, don't you? You know, but they knew that they could see that I had this passion, and I guess for some other reason, my dad, for my 4th birthday, he had gotten me a little practice pad and like a wood block and a cymbal and all that, and I used to sort of set them up on the couch, and you know, they would put on Beatles records and everything, and I guess my dad noticed that I was kind of keeping time with them, and so he sort of saw that and nurtured it, you know, and playing different types of music, you know. So it was like, it went from, you know, Ringo Starr, which was awesome, to, you know, Max Roach,
right,
to Buddy Rich, to Tony Williams, and to Billy Cobham, and all this stuff, and then I think by my 8th birthday, I'd gotten a drum set, but for some other reason, we set it up backwards. And I was sort of playing a left-handed kit, but for some reason I couldn't get my left foot to work on the bass drum, you know, and we didn't make the connection, but we were just like, but I was like, no, this is the way it feels comfortable for me, you know. But when I just had the bass drum there, and I was like, well, you know, the bass drum is there just to be there because, you know, Ringo's got, you know, the Beatles on front, and it's just to hold for the logo.
It's a billboard.
The billboard. You don't actually play it.
Yeah, right.
My dad was like, well, what's the pedal there for? Of course you play it.
True.
And so I was doing a lot of sort of little fills leading with my left hand, and then my dad's like, come on, let's just switch it around. And I cried. I was like, no, don't switch it around. Don't switch it around.
You're working so hard, playing the wrong way all this time.
And then he switched it around, and it was like, ka-ching. Oh. And there we go. You know, it was like, yes, my foot now is working. And so that was my foray into finally getting the drum set right.
Were you playing this in the apartment?
No. My parents also had a place up in Massachusetts, which they still have.
Wow.
Which was sort of where I was, you know, my parents had come to this decision where, okay, we can stay at the place we're staying at on Christopher Street, or, you know, we can have this extra money and go live in a loft in Soho, which at the time was not a safe place to be.
Right.
But you could still get these incredible lofts for really cheap.
Wow.
So instead, they decided to take their extra money and build a house up in Western Massachusetts.
Yeah.
So that's but they still and they still have the place on Christopher Street.
That is so bizarre.
Yeah.
Your
So
childhood home.
yeah. So up in Massachusetts was where the drum set was.
Ah.
During the week when I was at school, like I had, the practice pad. My dad had gotten me this, practice pad set, which I think Colaiuta made at the time.
Yeah.
Which was these 4 practice pads that were rubber on one side and sort of this foam with a plastic over it on the other side. And so that's sort of what I played on during the week,
Right. Just all hands, right? No pedals or anything.
Well, there was a pedal for it.
Oh,
there
really?
There was a little. It was one of these things where there was a mock bass drum pad. It was like all these different pads mounted, and it's like a drum set that you could use,
Wow.
as a drum set, So
That's wild, man.
I don't know where it is now, but it was amazing.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, it allowed you to play during the week when you were in the city, So that's pretty crucial in
Kept
your
it
development,
quiet.
ironically, if you
Yeah.
look back at it, I guess.
They're like, no, use the practice pad. Don't use the coffee cans.
Right.
Bang,
Bang. Clanging them. Well, it sounded like your parents had some eclectic music going on in the house. Was there any particular drummer throughout those early years where your mind was really getting blown by their playing?
I mean, I would say, it started obviously with Ringo Starr because, I he just, it just grew so hard. And for me, it was like, that was just being, able to keep those grooves was a novelty to me. It was just amazing, and the fills that he did were so epic, and I sort of I'm like, I get this. I love this,
Right.
Once Billy Cobham came around, everything that I was into went out the window.
Yeah.
So like when my dad, we went to this, so there was these couple of music stores up in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, which was near there. And so we went into this record store and there was this album Spectrum, so, so we're like, all right, let's pick it up. And
That's awesome.
I was blown away. Like I probably listened to that album just nonstop. Like when, Quadrant 4 came on, it's like you hear this little guitar squeak and, and then you hear Billy count off, and you're like, okay, what is this? And all of a sudden it's this shuffle,
Yeah.
and you're listening, you're first of all like, what is this doing with his feet? And then you hear this, his hands doing this, like, this rough and
Yeah.
and the sound of the drums and
crazy.
then the fills and then like trying to dissect, like that album exposed me sort of to odd time signatures and trying to figure out like what the actual tune spectrum was in, like, okay, it's in 7, okay, but this is like the pattern that he was playing,
Right.
that was a whole other thing, so that was like my foray into sort of fusion,
Right.
and then it was, for a long time, that was just all I wanted to know about, was just everything Billy Cobham, everything Tony Williams.
Yeah.
Those two were it.
I hear you.
Yeah,
it's funny. I found Spectrum after I had heard Mahavishnu Orchestra. So the first one that I've got was Intermountain Flame, followed by Birds of Fire, and then I think I got Spectrum after that. But I remember my buddy. I've talked about it previously. He's this crazy drummer that I know from Louisiana, and he framed it in a very strange way. He said, "Dude, it's like the most crazy punk rock shit you ever heard." And I remember thinking, a punk rock band named like Mahavishnu Orchestra? Right. What the hell? Like, is it an orchestra? Is it a punk rock orchestra?
Yeah.
So going into it, my perspective was already skewed. I had no idea what I was about to get into. And then when I heard the drumming, the same thing, I was like, I think the closest thing that I could think to even connect to that might have been some of the, like, Bill Bruford's playing and Yes. But then Billy's is like so much more outrageous, and like
Yeah.
just the fills and the speed and the odd time and
Yeah.
the just bombastic nature of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it was.
I was just like, what the hell is this? I had definitely never heard any shit like that
Yeah,
ever.
and it just was like you got to be kidding me. And the energy, like
Yeah.
you know, at that point, right? We didn't have YouTube, we didn't have videos
Right.
or anything, so I was only imagining, like I could tell like the energy this guy was putting out
Yeah.
behind the drums, and then like when I got to see him at the Bottom Line for the first time. Like, oh my God, you know, this is it. You know, it blew my hair off. You know, I just like.
It's funny that you mentioned, pre-YouTube. I was just thinking about it earlier today, and we're kind of fast-forwarding era-wise, but one of the bands that you play with, 24/7 Spies, I was thinking about how I originally found out about them, and this sort of alludes back to the pre-YouTube time where you just had to either know somebody or get lucky, or there was so much chance involved in finding it if you didn't know people that weren't into it, you know? Like, for instance, 24/7 Spies, the way that I found out about them, I got a compilation tape of the record label that they were on. It had this crazy band, Scatterbrain, that was also on it. They did this silly song like Don't Call Me Dude. It was ridiculous. But that was the first time that I heard 24/7 Spies. So that was probably like 1990 or so, maybe 89, something like that.
Yeah.
But at that time, I was like, what do I even have to reference this? It was what would kind of become sort of alternative, quote unquote, you know?
Sure.
But the Red Hot Chili Peppers, for instance, had put something out. And the way that I found out about that was that there was a radio station, and every now and again they'd play cool stuff real late at night past my bedtime.
Right.
So I'd get the 120-minute cassette tape and roll it, because with the auto reverse, you could record 120 minutes, 60
that's
minutes
right.
each
I remember
side.
that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so I did that, and then I would play back and forward it through it and listen to see if I could find bands, and they would announce it, and then I'd be like, oh, that was cool. That's the way I found out about the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
Was going back through a cassette tape that I recorded in the middle of the night, and I'd
That's awesome.
never heard of them.
Yeah.
And like prior to that, maybe my only reference was like 1988 Living Colors Vivid.
Yeah.
Like that was another one where it was like, this is oddball shit.
Yeah.
It's definitely different.
Yeah.
And it would usher in a whole nother thing. But
Absolutely.
it's just hilarious when I think back as to the bizarre instances that led me to the music that would ultimately become influential in my life. Pre-internet, it is a totally different thing.
Yeah,
I mean, no
clear.
wonder kids are spoiled these days, like instantaneous access to all this stuff.
Yeah.
Just being able to watch all of this stuff, you
Yeah.
know? You used to have to go watch, you'd have to wait for them to come into town,
Yeah,
and you better
to
be
see
there
them.
to catch them.
Yeah, exactly. You had to wait for them. I mean, when I was growing up, I used to go to sleep with the radio on. So we had, at the time when I was a youngster or whatever, 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
We had this radio station here in the city called WRVR.
Okay.
Which was, at the time, I mean, it was one of the greatest radio stations ever, because they played everything from, Thelonious Monk to Weather Report to Joni Mitchell, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Sort of, and, you could get, I mean, I remember like waking up in the middle of the night, like midnight, hearing punk jazz.
Whoa.
And it's Jocko ripping it. But they would make the announcements on the radio. Chick Corea is going to be at the town hall here, and my dad heard it and he said, "Okay, we're going to go get tickets." We'd have to go to the box office
Exactly.
and get the tickets. But it was still like, even though you didn't have YouTube, you had these stations where they were playing this awesome mix of stuff,
Yeah.
and from everything,
Yeah.
like not just straight ahead jazz, but fusion, pop, jazz, fusion, everything. So
Yeah,
it was
no
great.
doubt. I hear you, man. I tell you what, it's so funny. In thinking about YouTube, I just came across a video that I'd never seen prior to yesterday, and it's Billy Cobham, Art Blakey, and Simon Phillips playing side by side.
I heard about this.
Man, I gotta tell you what, dude. Simon Phillips sounds incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Like Billy just shreds.
Yeah.
And Simon, to my ear, sounds like he's splitting the difference between Art and
Yeah,
Billy.
yeah.
He's swinging, and it's got like, you could tell, I can hear the Buddy Rich in his playing.
Oh, yeah.
But he's playing big like rock style drums.
Yeah.
And open handed as well, which I
Yeah.
believe he got from Billy from
Yeah,
seeing Billy.
That's right.
Man, Simon is one of those guys, and still to this day when I watch videos, I'm like, man, this guy is so musical. When he solos, he's one of the most musical soloists.
Yeah.
He's really amazing.
Oh, I agree. Like, not only does his drums always sound amazing.
Yes. Yes.
But he's such a great soloist. I want to say when that first little mini solo album he put out, Protocol, came out, and it's got a live drum solo, I think, on the end, and it's so musical.
Yeah.
And he builds it and it grooves.
Yeah.
And then, he goes bananas for a second, then he brings it back. It's like he's really listening.
He really is. When I think of because soloing is such a hard kind of skill set to develop. I mean, just simply grooving can be hard as well,
Yeah.
I think you definitely have to put in a lot of time if you really want to be able to rip and be able to create a narrative with your solos and kind of create this big thing. But luckily for me, growing up and seeing all these amazing drummers in New Orleans, it was like I would see so many guys play drum solos.
Yeah, sure.
So it was like that's a skill set you have to have. It wasn't just enough to be able to groove and be
you had to,
sort of multifaceted with what different styles you're interested in.
Sure.
That was also an aspect of playing.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
to this day, I'm like, oh God, my soloing sucks. Like I just get bummed out.
It's a
about
hard
it.
thing. It really is. I mean, I have had a hard time kind of just going in there and going, okay, yeah, I'm just, doing a clinic. Okay, I'm just going to solo. Usually I have to kind of think about something. Like I have to have a little predetermined plan. Like,
Sure.
okay, here's some grooves that I'm going to work off, or here's something, I can't just like, I somehow think that, guys like Simon, they just go in there, or Vinnie, just go in there and go, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to
It
go
seems
for it,
like it.
or something's affected me in my life, and so this is what I'm portraying.
Yeah, it's the feeling I'm going for.
Yeah.
Something that is seemingly abstract
Yeah.
in comparison to simply having an outline with some grooves that you can then solo off of.
Exactly.
As opposed to just sitting down, I feel this way, I'm going for it. Mm-hmm. Like, I that gives me anxiety just thinking about that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It's like, okay, bunch of guys coming. How you guys doing? All right.
Right. Yeah, hope this doesn't bomb. But you
Yeah.
know what's funny, man? It's a bizarre scenario, and I think it still affects me a little bit to this day, but the first drum solo I ever played was at my junior high school, and it was me and two other drum set players, and we played Wipeout or whatever, and then we would do the Wipeout solo and then take like a little short solo.
Right.
And I'm not tooting my own horn, but I was definitely, I think, more talented than the other guys.
Yeah.
But I just had a bad night, and I just flailed on the thing, and I sucked. And then I was like, all right, we did the same performance later for like the parents. It wasn't just at school.
Yeah.
And then I killed that. I got myself up for it. I was
yeah.
like in the car listening to Megadeth, like getting psyched, like I'm gonna kill this shit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna blow the doors off. I had like 3 licks that I could play, but at least I redeemed myself.
Right.
But
Exactly.
still to this day, I swear, man, I think I'd have to go to a hypnotist to get this out of my head. I think it's still a little bit in the back of my head, the failure of my first drum solo. I think it still fucks with me a little bit to this day.
It does, man. I know that. It's like I remember like I sat in with some group at like my elementary school, and it was like, sort of the first time that I was, it was like some little band that came and they let me sit in, they let me, do a drum solo, and I remember it was like my dad was like, well, just be musical and everything, and I went out the window, and I'm playing there, and I just, I saw my dad sort of looking up in the air.
Oh, no.
And I was like,
Oh, God.
yeah, okay,
Wow.
like I failed,
Oh,
And,
man.
I mean, my dad was always very supportive, but it was, one of those moments you're like, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
guess I'm not ditto.
Oh, God. That sucks, man. Well, at a certain point, did you start taking lessons at a younger age with anybody?
I did. I started taking lessons when I was 8. And I first started taking lessons with this local drum teacher here, there in the West Village, who lived in this building, West Beth, which was sort of like a big, all the places in there were like these beautiful lofts, but there was a lot of artists in there, like, John Schofield lives there.
Nice.
There's like, it was a bunch of heavy people. Merce Cunningham, lives there. I mean, all these. So my drum teacher was there, and I met him through some mutual friends of my parents. And we were at a party of theirs, and they're like, oh, Bruce lives down the hall. He's a drum teacher. It might be great for you to go, And so I met, and his name was Bruce Smith. And Bruce was, by and large, a jazz drummer, but he also played timpani, and he also played vibes. And he wrote, and had a great band with this percussionist. And he was very instrumental in sort of making me understand rudiments. And we kind of worked out of these books called, like, by Joel Rothman, like the Rock and Roll Bible, and sort of basic syncopation, and sort of some of it was geared towards, playing jazz and getting comfortable with coordination things between the bass drum, hi-hat, and snare drum, but while keeping the ride cymbal going. And then he would also have me work on trading fours using some of the paradiddles and all that stuff. And I was like the worst drum student. He was trying to talk and I would be playing the whole time. Then, and he was always very cool. And finally he was like, can you stop, please?
I still struggle with that to this day. That's for sure.
I was like, sure, okay, no problem. And I loved playing his drum set. He had this old Gretsch set, but it was a black wrap.
Okay.
And it was sort of like three toms, bass drum, and great old Zildjian cymbals. One of them was like a flat ride with rivets, and
nice.
And it was. And he was very encouraging, great teacher, for especially for kids starting out. And then I want to say maybe 82, 83, my dad took me to the Zildjian Day in New York. Or maybe the one of two Zildjian Days that they had in New York.
Okay.
Which was, it was with Alex Acuna.
Oh, cool.
Tommy Campbell, Vinnie Colaiuta,
wow,
Billy Cobham, and Steve Gadd.
Whoa!
And it was wild. I mean, that was sort of like when Vinnie Colaiuta first came out. So when he came on stage and was doing some of the stuff he did, I mean, no one had any idea what the hell was going on.
Really?
Yeah.
In hindsight, what do you think? What do you know? What some of that was?
Well, now I do. But back then, I mean, to hear someone sort of playing this funk groove and then all of a sudden start displacing it by a 16th note,
right? And
like doing this thing where where he kind of makes it sound like a CD or a record skipping,
right?
So then, back in '83, he's like,
yeah,
and you're like, what is he doing?
Right?
I mean, people were just floored. And I mean, and it doesn't help that like they served alcohol at that event, so. Bunch of drummers, all liquored up.
Nice.
Bad situation.
Oh, that's my kind of party. I'm ready.
We had this guy in back of us who was like, he'd come up. He's like, yeah, I have a question. Vinnie, what kind of underwear do you wear?
Oh, come on.
Yeah,
Jesus.
and Vinnie was like, yeah, Hanes briefs. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Next question, please. Yeah. Oh, wow, he answered it.
He answered. So it's like funny. Like that one guy ended up getting thrown out. These bouncers grabbed him and tossed him out.
No way.
And then someone let him back in.
Oh, come on.
and then they punched a guy in the face.
Come on.
And he ran up on stage, and they're trying to give away like a set of like, the sort of low budget Zildjians.
Uh-huh.
And he runs up on stage with his nose bleeding, and it's Armin Zildjian. And he's like, I'd like to give this cymbals this great, and the guy comes up. He's like, hey. He's like, look what they did to me. I just wanted Billy Cobham's autograph. Look what they did to me. And
oh, my bleeding. God.
They
what?
grabbed him, threw him out.
Threw him out again?
Threw him out again.
Wow. Okay, so that's not quite the drunken drummer party I want to go to.
Yeah,
dude.
It was insane. It was insane. But, I mean, like, all those guys, like, it was some of the most amazing playing. Steve Gadd came out and was... he was so high that he just like had no idea what was going on. But he played maybe 10 minutes out of the whole time of his clinic.
Uh-huh.
But he played some of the most amazing stuff ever.
Really?
Like and he had the Yamaha set, but like the heads were all like had, duct tape goo on them, and he had these crack cymbals.
His drum sets always sounded crazy
You
to
know,
me.
they sounded, I mean, it was crazy, but he was the only one who made that Sega sound good. And his floor tom, like his biggest floor tom, dude, it sounded like a freaking traffic accident. It was so huge, and he just, I mean, he cooled everybody out, with like, even though he was,
fairly loaded himself.
very
perhaps.
loaded, yeah. So it was great. But at that concert, what I meant to by getting around it was that at that concert, the concert first started out with an ensemble from the Drummers Collective.
Oh wow!
So in the ensemble, Kim Plainfield was playing drums, Frankie Malabe was playing percussion, and there was a bunch of other. So it was pretty serious. And my dad had been looking in the pages of Modern Drummer and sort of realized that, this is a school near us.
Yeah.
And took me there and, met with the directors there, who were Rob Wallace and Paul Siegel. And I sort of went in there and auditioned for Rob, and my dad was like, play him that beat from, that Vinnie plays on You're So Square by Joni Mitchell, so I had sort of not mastered it, but I'd gotten it down a little bit, which was like, I think at the end of that version, he goes into this sort of kind of 6/8, and he does doing all this crazy stuff, which I couldn't do, but I could play the groove. And I finished, and there was this pause, and, and Rob said, well, I think he's great. Okay. I wasn't sure, like, because he just kind of, he had this poker face on the whole time.
Right.
I think he's great. Okay. So from that moment on, I went there and spent the next 4 years, studying with Kim Plainfield, Fred Klatz, and Pete Zeldman.
Huh.
So, and that's sort of where stuff really, kind of took off for me. I mean, Kim was, to me, one of the best teachers that I ever had, if
Really?
not the best teacher. I mean, he was a pressure cooker, and could sort of make you walk out of there with your tail between your legs and all that. But he had such a great program that was instrumental to everything, from technique to sight reading to, working on Latin rhythms. And he would play piano, electric piano, along with you.
Wow.
So he was actually playing along with you while you worked out, like, okay, here's a songo, here's a, whatever, wan ko, whatever, and he had a legitimate routine for me that, took me 4 years to get through.
Wow.
And I still have the stack of papers, of everything.
That's intense.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I didn't have anything quite that regimented, I don't think. I think while I was in college, I mean, I came up through like talented music programs and jazz band and then marching band, and then in college, I would just study with whatever drum teacher was there.
Yeah.
And that was a leap just to accept that I was going to go to a drum set instructor.
Yeah.
Because my band teacher in high school, he was like, he told me, he said, Jody, I think you got a good style, man. Don't let anybody take that from you. You got to be careful about people taking your style from you.
Right.
And then, so I was always a little weary about going to have someone. But in the end, yeah, it was monumental in challenging me and changing so much about the way that I thought. And I think I was still able, because I was able to kind of develop a little bit of a style leading into that.
Yeah.
I was able to retain a little bit of that and then still build on top of it and learn along the way. So you mentioned obviously going through all the program. It sounded like you had a pretty influential teacher there at the Drummers Collective.
Absolutely.
At some point, you ended up going to Berkeley in addition to all that.
I did. When I graduated high school, I was at Music and Art High School, which was great, and I had studied also a lot of jazz drumming there with a teacher named Justin DeChocho, who was great and did big band and all. I was able to play big band and played timpani in an orchestra. So when I graduated way back in 1990.
Oh, wow.
From high school, then I went to Berkeley for about a year and a half maybe.
Okay.
And I'd gotten a scholarship there through this award that I had won, which is the Buddy Rich Memorial Scholarship.
Oh, you got that?
Yes.
Oh, that's sick, man. Damn.
So I had won the first one, which is held out in Westbury Music Fair here on Long Island, which was the sort of precursor to the one that happened in L.A., which is actually the one that's on videotape.
Oh, okay.
But it was all the same guys who were the judges there. So it was Steve Gadd, Dave Weckl, Vinnie Colaiuta, Louis Belson, Greg Bissonette. They didn't have Dennis there, but it was Joe Morello and Dom Famularo. All these guys were at this one out here in the Westbury Music Fair.
And that's the one that you played at?
That's the one.
And those were the judges?
They were the judges, and that was one I didn't play in person for them. We submitted videotapes.
Okay.
And they were, I
was going to say playing in front of them would have been...
No. They just judged our videotapes, you know, and then we got the award at the actual concert that they played at. So through that, I had gotten some scholarship money to Berkeley. So that sort of got me through a year, and it was awesome. And playing at Berkeley was great. I mean, that was I learned the most at Berkeley from playing with people. I got to sort of play the music that I wanted to play, that I was into, so everybody was into fusion,
Right.
At that point, like, Chick Corea's electric band was like the huge thing. Dave Weckle's Master Plan was like, everybody was playing that,
Yeah.
And but it was great because I had a roommate who was completely all about metal.
Nice.
So we had these different things, and so by hanging out with him, he barely said any word to me.
Right.
But by hanging out with him, all of a sudden I got into bands like Jane's Addiction,
Right.
Slayer,
Uh-huh.
Iron Maiden,
Yeah.
all this. So I had this like complete sort of, by the time I got out of Berkeley, I was completely into Racer X and Scott Travis and all this other stuff. So that was like
Yeah.
a whole brain shift right there,
That is wild, man. It's especially wild given that the experience that you had at the Drummers Collective, that flash forward, quite a few years, that you would end up back there teaching.
Yeah, I know that was sort of an amazing thing, because even when I go there today, it's sort of a flashback to sort of see these rooms.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, well, yeah, I remember what happened in this room X and X years ago. I remember studying in this room. I remember what the soundproofing at that point looked like,
Right.
I mean, it was sort of like how the rooms were set up, how, okay, now it's got this nice sort of fine carpeting on it,
Yeah.
and back then it was like this, shag gold carpeting,
Wow.
And like, okay, well, here's, I remember seeing Dave Weckl for the first time, like here, and like him playing to a cassette tape, of his like Contemporary Drummer Plus One, and playing to a cassette of it, through the sound system. So,
Wow.
yeah, it was crazy.
You have a couple of instances in your life where they're very cyclical. Every time you go back to your parents' house, you're like, wow, I grew up here. Every time you go back to the Drummers Collective teach, you're like, oh, wow, I grew up here. Yeah. It's the cyclical aspects of your life that are
I can pinpoint, every time I'm at my parents' place, I can pinpoint exactly, what happened here, what happened there, when I was practicing here, and the old radio that I listened to all those stations on growing up is still there.
Come on, you kidding me?
It's still in my parents' room, which is now...
Does it still work?
It still works.
Come
it's
on.
An old radio.
They made shit to last back then.
Yeah,
That's
it
what's
was
going.
serious. I mean, wood like
Right.
this. And,
oh, it's beautiful.
and you had to kind of turn the knob to get to it.
Yeah.
So, and it still works. It's still there. And my room, which is now my mom's office, it's still like, okay, I remember everything that happened here,
Whoa. God, no shortage of nostalgia in your life,
Yeah,
man.
exactly.
talk a little bit about some of the people that you play with, man. We talked a little bit about 24/7 Spies and like how I found them. I know that you played with those guys. I'm a fan of Jimmy Hazel's guitar playing and Rick's bass playing, man.
Yeah.
Was it Joe Maitoza? Was that the drummer that played on like This Is 24/7 Spies and the record after that?
Yeah. He played on Strength in Numbers.
Yes.
And he also played on the Heavy Metal Soul by the Pound.
Okay, so they 24/7 Spies came through New Orleans for that record, but at that point Joe wasn't playing drums with him on that tour. It was some other kid that was badass.
Oh yeah, Matt someone.
He was badass.
Yeah.
To this day I was like, man, he was really nailed. The 24/7 Spies, especially when Joe got in the band, kind of had that almost shuffly, like perpetual heavy rock thing.
Yeah, it was like double bass stuff.
Yes, and the double bass stuff. And man, that kid who was playing that night was badass.
Yeah,
whoever he was.
Yeah, I can't remember his last name. Matt someone. But he was killing.
Yeah,
he was amazing.
What was it like playing with those guys, man?
I want to say it was unbelievable. I remember, I was such a big fan. I mean, Heavy Metal Soul was sort of my first exposure to them, and then I kind of went back once I sort of started playing with them and listened to all their catalog, and I was like, oh my God, this stuff is incredible. But I sort of auditioned for them or played for them at Ultrasound Studios.
Oh.
And so I went in there and I said, oh yeah, I'm looking for Jimmy Hazel. And they're like, who? You mean Wayne Richardson? I'm like,
is that his real name?
Yeah. And I was like,
yeah.
And then I opened the door. I was like, Jimmy? He's like, yeah. And he turns around and there he is with, hooking up his guitar. And Rick came in, and so Jimmy had some of these, like a couple of riffs that he was working on, which were to become tunes for Face the Day.
Oh, cool.
Like playing with those guys, like I say, it was just like a floating on a cloud.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden playing, I'm like, I have a pocket, because these guys had been playing together so long.
Oh yeah.
That it was just like they were one and the same. So, they came in there and they took my playing and they just like, it was like, it's like the baby on the quilted Charmin, you know what I mean? That was how it felt.
Yeah.
Even though we're playing all this aggressive stuff, it was that, because they both came from, such a vast influences, sort of from Jimi Hendrix to
Cool in the
Pleasure,
Gang to Michelle to like hardcore.
Everything, so that all came out, so that was why, all the stuff that they played, of course was heavy, but it had so much soul to it and pocket. And Jimmy was one of the first people, like not a lot of people realize that these guys were one of the first groups that were doing a lot of drop tuning stuff, like in a way almost before Soundgarden.
Right.
And
I think Harder Than You came out in 89, Gumbo Millennium, the second one, which was the way I found the first full length that I got from them. That was 1990, I think. So they were doing it back in the day for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So and then recording was great. Jimmy gave me a demo of the tunes, and he had programmed all the drum parts on there, and they were awesome programming. He wasn't strict with it, but he was just like, look, some of these patterns I really want. And I loved all the patterns. So when we recorded it, I tried to duplicate exactly as much as I could of what he wanted.
Interesting.
And because, he was very into, okay, I want you to like open those hi-hats up, like I want to get this wash sound or ride on the crash. But we had, these patterns would always be like this, with all this heavy bass drum that, you could have done with a double pedal, but it felt only right to do it with one. You had to do it with one, and he was really into, I want a huge bass drum sound, but I want this snare drum to be this like real, tight thing. So I recorded a lot of the album with like a regular 22-inch bass drum, but then with one of these, at that time I was with Sonar, but I used one of these sort of 10-inch snare drums that have the jingles in them. It's called the jungle snare. And so I used that, and like 16-inch hi-hats and 19, huge crashes, but this little snare drum.
Whoa.
So it was like,
right.
And I would try and switch it out and put up something, and he would come over the, Tobias, put up the other snare. Like, but put up the other snare. Okay.
Yep.
You know.
That's awesome.
So
Crazy, man. Another guy you play with that I'm a big fan of, going back to when I first heard Screaming Headless Torsos, was Dave Fuzinski.
Yeah.
The first time I heard JoJo Mayer as well. Another bizarre scenario. I think if I recall right, the name of that record's 1996. I think that's the year it would come out.
Yeah.
But my buddy who worked at a record store in Tennessee, a guy that I grew up with in Louisiana, said, "Man, if you come across this CD, this band Screaming Headless Torsos, you got to check them out." And I was like, "That name is ridiculous." But sure enough, I found a used CD. Somebody thought it was too crazy to keep.
Right.
And then I found it, got it, and I was immediately like, damn, this drumming is badass.
Yeah.
And then like no one knew who JoJo Mayer was at the time.
That's right.
Later on, I think he did one of the Modern Drummer Festivals on the DVD, and then people, but when I saw his name, I was like, as he should be. This guy seems like he's a ridiculously badass drummer.
Yeah, it was killing.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Boom. But tell me a little bit about playing with Dave Fuzinski, because that guy is on another planet.
Oh yeah, I mean, he was. I was fortunate enough to do some touring with the Torsos, which was that was a dream come true.
Yeah.
You know, because I had first seen the Torsos at, coincidentally, another Buddy Rich Memorial concert that they had done here in New York City, and I think it was like at the Ritz or something like that, and they played, and that was sort of JoJo's real foray to the drumming community.
Whoa.
You know, and so he blew my mind, and him and the percussion player Danny Sedownik.
That guy's super badass.
Yeah, so I'm still have great to play with Danny a lot, which is great, and he's amazing. But so, you know, getting to play all those tunes was amazing, and then and Dave he's got so much going on, you know, and so one moment he could be a pile driver, and like, okay. The next moment, he was the sweetest person in the world, you know. So you really tried to hang with him, like, because he would shove these like little pieces of paper, and okay, let's try this, and this is the idea of this, and so I was fortunate enough to end up working with him quite a bit in this trio called Keef,
which was another record that I've realized in hearing you play. I didn't. It's crazy.
Yeah, he was. I mean, it was. So that was when he started to really get into the microtonal slide guitar, and it was him and this cello player named Rufus Cappadocia. And Rufus did all this crazy stuff with slapping the cello, and it was. So we did a bunch of tours, and we recorded that album.
Yeah.
And at that point, Fuse was very into obviously the Middle Eastern stuff and all these scales, but he was also into sort of some of the Indian music, and also into the drum and bass jungle movement that was sort of coming into play into New York City at that point. So,
for sure.
So all of a sudden he was like, okay, we're going to play this sort of Indian stuff, but I want you to try and play some of this jungle stuff, which means, you sort of have to sound like a machine. But I want you to improvise with me as well, so trying to kind of, okay, let me try and play these amen break beats, but then kind of go with him as well, and so we did a couple of tours with that, and then he had this other project called Black Cherry Acid Lab, which was sort of, more kind of a punk thing, and God, who the singer, Ahmet Best was the singer, and Ahmet, like, did a bunch of stuff in Star Wars movies and all that, but he kind of came in there, and he was like another crazy, rapper singer, and doing like martial arts on stage and everything.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so we did that, and and we did. I was lucky enough to do a bunch of tours with Fuse, with Keef, and with the Screaming Headless Torsos.
That's awesome.
And it was always, something that was amazing to jump into, because it immediately pushed your music, all the stuff, way up there. Because you're having to hang, and playing with Danny was amazing, because Danny, he's like a human metronome.
Yeah.
His time is so perfect, and he's a force of nature on percussion.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like you had to hang with him, and if you weren't hanging with him, you would know it.
Yeah.
All these guys would know it. It's like I'd done a couple of shows where, like, you would either get the kind of like, Tobe, you need to work on this. Or, like sometimes I did a couple of shows with Fuse and it was just like, okay, no one's saying anything to me. Whoa,
Oh,
okay.
no.
Like, this is not good,
Oh, no.
But at the same moment, the next week, Fuse would be giving you a hug. It's like I remember I got married and he came to my wedding,
Yeah.
and he gives me a kiss on the head, and I was like, who are you? You're this incredible genius guitar player, composer, and here you are, it was wild.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me that the pendulous personality type of someone that's so talented, yeah, I'd imagine it can be a little erratic.
Constantly these incredible ideas, and you're just trying to hang on.
Yeah, that.
But it's like, okay, I'm trying to get into your head. I'm trying to,
Yeah. Well, man, another guy that you played with, ridiculously talented guitarist, and Adrian Belew, who, when I think about him, I mean, my God, to have played with Frank Zappa, King Crimson, Talking Heads, David Bowie, especially anybody to have played in King Crimson and Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
Come on now. That's just crazy.
It's crazy. I mean, and that's just like the stuff that people know is just like a smidgen of it. Like if here's a fact, I don't know if you know, like, the tune Call Me Al?
Yeah.
That main riff. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
So that's Adrian. Adrian came up with that riff.
Come on.
Yep. So they doubled it with horns, but that's him playing guitar synth.
Whoa.
Yeah. So that's,
really?
Yeah, that's Adrian.
Wow.
And you remember the tune Genius of Love by Tom Tom Club?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Yes, it has this.
Uh-huh.
So that was like Adrian wrote that riff. And later on, like, this is a great story. Later on in life, Mariah Carey sampled that. So, like, when, he was at like a closing party for a King Crimson concert, like like I guess a couple of guys came up to Columbia Records came up to him, gave him I think a platinum record and a check, and he's like, what's this for? And he's like, well, your two, Genius of Love was sampled by Mariah Carey, and it's like one of the top tunes in the country. And he was like, oh,
who is Mariah Carey?
Here's Mariah Carey,
Oh, that's amazing.
So that's the kind of stuff that, he's done stuff with Tori Amos, obviously 9 Inch Nails. Yeah.
When you think about talented people, would you say he's one of the most talented people you've come across?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
I mean, he's one of those guys who's been able to sort of cross the boundaries of, being able to write great pop songs and be also this crazy guitar legend doing stuff that no one's ever seen done. So absolutely, such an amazing talent.
So presently, man, what do you have going on? I know you've been hanging with my buddy Alex Cohen, who I've also interviewed on the podcast, and I've seen play, and he's quite a character. Tell me a little bit about what y'all have been doing.
Well, we just been, we've just been getting together and shooting some videos, and we're trying to, put some master classes together, and it's been good for us because we're both, we get all into this technical stuff. So it's been a healthy, positive outlet for both of us to just go, okay, we're going to play together and do this. But now some people were interested. So now we're trying to figure out how some of these things that we're doing, how to do them slow and how to show them in a musical situation. It's been nice because people sort of want to know, and they certainly want to know what Alex is doing because he gets on there and he just does stuff, and people are like, yeah, okay, so what is that? It's been good for us to kind of force to play things slow and figure out what we're doing, and people have been, liking that, or I think they have, and
for sure.
Like, okay, what are the transcriptions, and at this point, I'm like, if people like it, then great, do whatever you want with it. I feel that there's nothing that's being done right now that's like, oh my God, that's original. No one else has done that. No one's doing that. It's all been done before. It's just sort of how it's being reintroduced.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I could play you 3 licks that I have, and they're the same 3 licks that I've been playing forever, and really everything kind of comes from those 3 licks.
Right.
So,
Well, those are good 3 licks. At some point, I'll have to hook up with you. You can show me some of those licks.
Whatever, of course.
Hell yeah, man. Cool. Well, man, Tobias, it was fun hanging with you and talking to you, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, man.
Yeah,
Great.
man. We'll keep a lookout for videos online, and obviously you're at the Drummers Collective.
Yeah.
And catch you out playing out somewhere.
Yeah,
some
hopefully
kind
be
of
out with Adrian again, and we'll see what happens in the coming new year.
Nice.
So,
All right, I'm looking forward to it.
yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thanks to Tobias for hanging a rap with me. Definitely fun talk with him and picking his brain on some things. Now I got to just go take a lesson with him so I can get up on them speedy singles. You know what I'm saying? Anyways, we'll catch y'all on the next one, all right? Stay tuned. Crash, bang, boom.